how can I explain to someone that starvation mode isn't a thing?
I'll let you lead with this one.
Okay. Well, so whenever I talk about this, there's always the debate over, well, what is starvation mode? So let's start with that. From what I see on social media, there are two main discussions about what starvation mode is or is not. So what I was brought up with in the fitness industry, and what is still a very mainstream belief, is that if you don't eat enough calories, then your body will somehow go into this mysterious thing known as starvation mode because you're not eating enough. And as a result of being in this quote unquote starvation mode, your body will somehow store more body fat because you are not eating enough. And that is fucking stupid. That makes no sense because no one in the history of the entire world ever got fat from starving. Ever. And a lot of people will be like, well, it's different. Like, well, this person's only eating 1,200. I'm like, well, 1,200 calories a day and they're gaining weight. I'm like, well, then, and they're in starvation mode. Like, well, what about someone eating 600 calories a day? And like, well, that's different. I'm like, well, how is that different?
Not only that, but the 1,200 is anecdote based on self-reported data. Like, look at every metabolic ward study where calories were controlled. And by the way, that's the only definition of starvation mode that I'm aware of. So I'm very excited to hear this new second one.
Yeah. So there's this new second one. And this has come, by the way, with the rise of reverse dieting. So the second definition has come from with the rise of reverse dieting because of people figuring out about metabolic adaptation. I get asked about metabolic adaptation all the time. And people are so worried about it that their metabolism is adapting. And so basically what has happened is people will say, well, then how come when people reverse diet, they continue to lose weight even though they increase their calories? It's like, okay, well, that's actually a good question. When people are reverse dieting and they continue to lose weight, let's say you have someone legitimately eating 1,200 calories a day. Like legit, they're eating 1,200 calories a day. And then they increase their calories to 1,500 and they continue to lose weight. That doesn't mean they're not still in a calorie deficit. They could continue to lose weight because they're still in a calorie deficit. And oftentimes they're like, well, how come they stopped losing weight at 1,200? Well, sometimes what will happen is when you're eating way too few calories, your body will be very stressed. Cortisol will rise. You'll hold on to water for a little bit, whether it's a day, 2 days, 3 days, a week, 2 weeks can even happen where the scale and the weight scale weight will not go down. But that doesn't mean you're not losing fat. It just means the scale weight isn't changing because you're holding on to water. Eventually it would go away. But when you increase calories to 1,500, cortisol went down. You were still in a calorie deficit. So then you started to lose weight. And it appears as though now you're losing weight more quickly on a higher calories. That's not the case. It's just you just reduced stress. So water went away. And you're just showing that you're actually still losing fat while still being in a calorie deficit.
And you're describing a scenario where adherence is perfect at 1,200.
Exactly.
When this is the outlier. That's not the norm. The norm is you're eating 1,200, but you're really not adhering to 1,200. You're eating 1,200 a few days in a row, and then you have a high calorie day, and then there's some willful blindness. Then you eat 1,200 for a few more days, and then there's the weekend comes along. There's a couple high calorie days. You're only focusing on the days you're actually eating 1,200. You're actually netting much higher than that. So then when you reverse, or just when you increase your calories, you're better able to adhere to the higher calorie intake, which actually leads to your total weekly intake being lower on 1,500 than it was on 1,200. That's how the majority of people who lose more weight when they increase their calories, that's how they're doing it.
That's right. And some people say that, so because when you reduce your calories, your metabolism goes down, that when you then increase your calories, your body is more likely to store fat because your metabolism is down now. And this can happen in people who severely restrict calories for a significant period of time where, like, and I'm talking about prisoner of war status. I'm talking about legitimate anorexia where they actually legitimately damage their metabolism. And then once they start eating more, they will put on a little bit more body fat. This is a super, super small percentage of the population. And it's also, for the vast majority of people, a relatively quick fix for their metabolism. Their metabolism recovers very soon thereafter. So it's really not that big of a deal. So these are the two different definitions of starvation mode. One is the one that you and I have both heard our whole lives. The other is that starvation mode being it's easier to add body fat once you then reduce your calories enough and your metabolism is lower. Either way, the first one is just entirely, completely false, blatantly false. The second one has glimmers of truth in it, but it's way overplayed and there's more fear mongering around it that you really have to worry about.